have this maybe moving around would be incredible. Women and young girls want to be more visible, want to be seen and be treated fairly. And I think that voice just needs to become louder.
Hello, I'm Eve Holt, Strategic Director for Greater Manchester Moving. Welcome to Series 2 of the Right to the Streets edition of the GM Moving podcast. There are things that we can all do to create safe, joyful and welcoming streets, parks and public spaces where all women and girls feel they belong and are invited to be active. Together with GM Moving colleagues, I've been working with people and partners in Trafford, Greater Manchester to do just this.
3, 2, 1, action!
We live here, our families are here, and we want this to be a safe space for our children to grow up as well.
You'll hear from lots of the people and partners involved, including local citizens, community leaders, politicians, commissioners, sports organisations, artists, comms experts, facilitators, performers, and many others, who've all been playing an active role as part of a whole system approach to women's safety, shifting the dial from fear to freedom. In this episode, which is the last for the Right to the Streets edition of the GM Moving podcast, we're talking about what's next. Throughout the whole of the Right to the Streets initiative and across the last 16 episodes of this podcast, you've heard us say again and again that this is not the end. Far from it, it is just the beginning. Whilst we started with only 12 months of specific funding for the Right to the Streets partnership, we've always been clear that we wanted to use that to galvanise people and catalyse longer-term action, mainstreaming a gendered perspective on our public spaces and places and connecting people and partners as a sustained movement for change. And collectively, it feels like we've really started something. Both what we did and how were designed to create ongoing ripples, to grow learning, inspiration and connectivity for sustained and systemic reimagining and change. So, coming up in this episode, we explore the longer-term impact people want to see and how this work can continue to influence the wider change across whole systems, from communities through to policymakers and national government. Such as embedding a community connector role at the heart of our work in North Trafford to build relationships in place that helped local groups and individuals access more pots of funding.
It's a lot about being face-to-face and just getting to know people and spending time with them. And that's essentially what I think my role is about.
We then go back to where we started, right at the very beginning of Right to the Streets, as I catch up with leaders at Trafford Council to talk about how Right to the Streets will continue to influence their Safer Streets work in the borough and beyond.
I think that a lot of the learning that has happened will continue. The fact that it's proven that community focus is a great way to kind of tackle gender-based violence and that it's very impactful. Hopefully we can take some of that learning and some of that energy and it can continue.
And finally, we get some thoughts from our partners about what they'd like to see happen next.
I hope that we will be able to allow the work that we've created, the resources, the games, the blog posts, the podcasts, become the key resources for everyone everywhere to start to make changes in their own lives, in their own work.
But before we get to all that, I want to explain a little bit more about our approach to place-based initiatives. There is loads of evidence to show that short-term projects and programmes don't create sustained change. The parachuting in of people and partners into an area to deliver short-term projects and outputs can in fact be detrimental to longer-term progress. They can leave local people feeling used and betrayed, and local partners left to pick up the pieces of broken trust and relationships. This is why we determined from the start to design and position Right to the Streets as a catalyst for longer-term change by investing in and resourcing local people and partners. This was embedded into our initial bid to the Home Office and our theory of change, building on tried and tested GM Moving enablers. So what are these enablers? Well, GM Moving's work and experience has pointed to some key enablers and ways of working as critical to a successful place-based approach to addressing a complex issue like physical inactivity or violence against women and girls. These enablers were therefore intentionally designed into the approach from the start, to include listening to, involving and resourcing local people, centring the most marginalised voices with an intersectional lens on power and privilege, Bring together people and cross-sector partners on an equal footing as experts by experience and by trade to learn, co-create and co-deliver a diverse, dynamic, energising array of activities for people to get involved in. Facilitating a test and learn approach with ongoing reflection embedded throughout the process. Demonstrating the potential to make a difference at pace by growing distributive leadership, networks and movements as effective mechanisms for rapidly rippling change. And developing, strengthening and growing effective and trusted processes, governance and partnerships and spaces that help advance this work. This includes sharing effective models and ways to involve people and partners at scale so everyone can play their part in delivering a shift to cultural, policy, physical, social and behavioural norms, which in this case perpetuate sexual harassment in public spaces. Equipping people with the tools, resources and information so that they can act and play their full part. We've seen people avoid taking on these tools and resources, embedding them into the things that they're doing day to day. So the Right to the Streets hasn't come to a hard end, and people haven't just disappeared. Quite the opposite, actually. Partners, organisations and people that we've worked with have now got ownership of the issue, and they're present in these places and spaces, and they are equipped to take the action and apply this lens to all the things that they're doing, which is absolutely fantastic. So let's hear more about how this looks in practice. Having people who are present in place was really important. A community connector who knows local people and the place and who can build on those to create more connections and longer term relationships was critical. This was Verity.
So I'm Verity Gardner. I work directly for Trafford Community Collective and I was the community connector for Right to the Streets. I'm also a resident of Old Trafford. I've lived there 6 years.
We knew that as GM Moving, we did not have all the answers or connections in place. We had to create a partnership of people and organisations that could support each other to take tangible strides for change on the issues that restrict the freedom of women and girls and gender diverse communities to walk about the streets without fear. I catch up with Verity at the GMC offices in Manchester and start by getting her take on what a community connector actually is.
I think essentially it's somebody who is out on the ground, going out, meeting people, making relationships, building on relationships, being quite present, consistent, making the time for people, lots of cups of tea and listening, really hearing what people are already doing and what they would like to do, and then somehow putting things together so that you can make these things happen. It's a lot about being face to face and being sort of consistent with it and just getting to know people and sort of spending time with them. There's lots of amazing assets in the community already, and these people know about a lot of them, but some might need a bit more promotion or support, and that's essentially what I think my role is about.
From your perspective, like what difference has it made having a community connector? Why does that matter?
Oh, I think it's crucial, really. It sort of bridges the gap between sort of the top layer partnerships who do a lot of strategic planning and that kind of thing and infrastructure. And then it's all about the people, the residents, the local people, and they are at coffee mornings. They're not in office blocks. I think it was actually really beneficial to have a community connector for a specific project. I have thought about this and whether, the council should employ a community connector, which I think there's nothing wrong with that per se, but I think having somebody who is dedicated to a campaign, it kind of gives it a real USP and you can really sort of like make it exciting and meaningful. So I'm pleased that, I'm seeing connector roles coming up in other areas. So Seed Studios, I've got a community connector. My next role is going to be a similar connector role, but for a slightly different demographic. And it's really exciting. It gives it sort of fresh energy and a focus.
And anything in particular that's been difficult? Any challenges along the way?
I think, there's been some learnings.
Go on.
At one point, I think I was trying to do too much, I think. And I think in one scenario, I perhaps maybe tried to get involved when I should have just taken a step back and let it happen organically. And I think I was just conscious of time and deadlines and wanting to get things off, you know, to get the ball rolling with one particular project. And unfortunately, just dates didn't match in the end, and we had to kind of change things quite last minute. And there were some difficult conversations because I felt like I'd let some people down, and that was really hard. And I tried to explain that they knew it was coming from a good place. It was just, perhaps in this situation, you can't do everything. You have to let people be autonomous and do it themselves. So that was one challenge.
And I guess that's because the strength is having, you know, you as a local resident who knows the place, or you knows lots of people, being there, having coffee, going to coffee mornings, being in those spaces, bumping into people, builds that trust and that understanding of place and of people in a place. But the challenge is then you don't escape it, do you?
Yeah.
You know, it's not a job that you then can return home from. You know, it's a bit like when people are counsellors or play other roles in a place, you know, people are going to see you. So that you can build trust probably quicker, but there must feel that sense then of responsibility. You've got to be able to maintain that, because otherwise these are your neighbours, you know, these are people that you're going to continue to bump into in the shop.
Yep.
So it does carry probably a sense of accountability in a community. So it's interesting how people often think about accountability in very formal, organisational, top-down, quite transactional ways, whereas I think you're probably as exposed and as accountable in this kind of a role as you possibly could be, which is why scenarios like you described there probably can happen quite easily, because you're trying to do lots of, I mean, who do you connect with what, you know, or where do you start and where do you stop?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I actually recently was asked what do you like most about living in your area, and I said my neighbours, because I've got a great relationship with them. But yeah, you're kind of always on show. I mean, sometimes it's really handy because you'll just bump into someone and you'll be like, oh, great. This happened Sunday night. I'm on the way to the pub. I saw 2 of my community grants people. And I was like, oh, this is fab. Like, this is it. This is still work. And I'm going to the pub. But then it's also being mindful that, you know, when you do bump into people, it's often a good idea just to check if that person has got the time to have that conversation now, because there are other people who, and they've told me that they suffer from sort of social anxiety and things like that. So if I was to jump on them in the street, it might not be appropriate. So I kind of hope that is a two-way street in terms of people approaching me. Sometimes is, sometimes isn't, and you just have to take it on the chin. You know, if you haven't got the time, you just have to be honest. Say, look, I will come and see you, I just can't talk right now. And similarly, I hope people feel that way when they see me coming. They might be like, oh God, what does she want now? I heard it was termed, I think it's called communication consent.
Like that.
So it's just, that checking in. Have you got the time? Are you in the right headspace for this conversation right now? And if not, you just find another time. But yeah, I think it is important, especially when you, like you say, the integration of being a resident and, you know, an employee you do have to have some boundaries.
There's something actually you referred to as like increasingly seeing other community connectors. So I guess I'm interested in, is that something you think is generally growing as a thing in Trafford and Greater Manchester? And anything particularly different about the other roles that you're seeing people play, but under that kind of community connector or similar sort of job title?
I think people throughout the UK are seeing that community is so important. Community centres, which we've lost a lot of, or youth clubs, which are barely in existence anymore. And people just doing DIY events. So we're not all going to big stadium shows because we can't afford it, but we can definitely put something on the church hall, or we can do, you know, a subsidised yoga class rather than spending 50, you know, like, I think the cost of living, coming out of COVID, people are really recognising the importance of what is on your doorstep, your local parks and sports centres, that kind of thing, biking. Yeah, there's there's quite an impetus to support local communities, and that's why doing this job was just a dream. It was amazing. And yes, I can see it happening with other jobs that are popping up. You know, when I got an email from another community connector, I was like, oh, we need to get together. We need to bring all the community connectors together, and we need to do some connecting or whatever. You know what I mean? But yeah, so it's really great. And I think the people that are doing those connecting roles, they're really, they've got loads of energy for it. And, you know, that they tend to be slightly more sort of outgoing people, giving confidence to people around them.
Fab. And I've definitely seen all of that in you. So we definitely bring the energy, a real, people describe, wouldn't they, kind of what's a people person, but, you know, that warmth and such an inclusive approach that you feel like, you know, people, I can see you as being very approachable. So to that point, you've kind of pointed out the potential and I guess the interest in what's on your doorstep and how important that is, and people remembering local neighbourhoods, and as you said, like COVID's particularly made that important, and cost of living. And I guess that speaks directly to the importance of the right to the streets, doesn't it? Because if you don't feel safe on your own doorstep, if that isn't a place that you feel you belong, then all those local assets suddenly, doesn't matter how close they are to you, become inaccessible to you.
I've worked with some South Asian communities since working on this project, and they're sort of quite limited in terms of how they can exercise and where they can exercise and who they can exercise with. And these are all things that we need to be culturally aware of and sensitive to, but there are ways to make it happen. So the WITA organisation, they did outside family fun days with mothers and daughters, which was gorgeous, but it was contained and it was safe. But it was the one step to kind of being out in the public and being seen, being visible. Yeah, I mean, we've done such great work with all of this, and we're getting people out there and getting people together. I think that's been key to it, because safety in numbers, and you're more aware of your surroundings and looking out for other people.
So one of the things that you led was the community arts grants and projects and overseeing those. So can you tell us a little bit about both, I guess, the process and then also, yes, a glimpse into what some of these fantastic groups did?
We wanted the application to be really simple. We made it so that individuals could apply for up to £500 and constituted organisations could apply for up to £2,000. We got loads of great feedback from individuals, because not often do they get an opportunity to apply for funding like that. I also linked individuals with organisations who were happy to then apply for more money. Yeah, we had 3 criteria and some sort of suggestions, and it was like a 3-pronged attack. So there was creativity, like creative projects, movement or fitness sort of movement activity, and then education as well. The freedom, personal safety, active bystander training, which everybody who's done has said it was really powerful. We opened the applications until the 18th of August, and we had 24 applications. And of those, we funded or part funded 22. We had yoga in the park. We sponsored several walking groups. We had learning to ride a bike. We had family fun days, kick out knife crime, which was a football tournament, which was really fun, working with the Violence Reduction Police Unit. In fact, Right to the Streets FC played them. We didn't win.
But you participated, and that's what counts.
Exactly. And then we've had murals, we've had Brew on a Bench, which is a really lovely, just really simple thing on a Wednesday between 1 and 3 at OT Creative Space. We just sit out and have a chat and a brew. And that's where I've met a lot of people, and I've invited them to a lot of the open days and the fun family days that we've put on. We've got Old Trafford Heritage and History Group are doing a photographic exhibition this afternoon at Limelight. Yeah, so we've worked with lots of different sort of people doing different things.
So there's a couple of things there that were quite, I guess, novel. So one, you mentioned the grants for individuals, which I guess tests the boundaries, doesn't it, for some organisations around what they're seeing, perceived risk, which is fascinating, about actually giving money to not to a constituted group, which was well received. So it'd be good if there's anything else around, I guess, that process, and anything that you would do differently or would like to do again.
One thing that we did offer was a free online bid writing session during the process when applications were open. And we had something like 67 sign-ups.
Wow.
And then I think there was about just under 30 attendees. And it was a relatively short turnaround time. So that just shows the appetite for it in sort of North Trafford. So I think next time definitely do maybe one or two sessions, maybe do an in-person one, because I think we don't want to exclude the people that aren't very digital. And that was another thing that we did actually for the applications. We said that they could come in by video, voice note, over the phone, handwritten or digital. So we try to make it as inclusive as possible. So definitely do all of that again. And perhaps maybe do a little bit more work with individuals applying, because we had a few, but most of the applications came from constituted organisations, like you say, because people are more expect that's what's okay. So I think really supporting individuals and perhaps maybe giving them a little bit more money. But maybe we do it in a staggered way.
And that's a phenomenal take-up, really, in what is it's a small neighbourhood here in a short time frame. So just to your point, that clearly shows the appetite and the need there to do more with that. And can you give us a glimpse of some of those different community projects?
Yeah, I can't believe I've not mentioned her already, actually. So Ella, our goal, she sent in a video application, and I remember watching it thinking, this is ideal, this is perfect, this is so right to the streets. And she doesn't mind her story being told, but she runs park football for women and girls. She set up Our Goal, which is now a CIC, after being attacked in the street a few years ago, and football really helped her find her confidence. So she's been doing every Saturday in September, and she has now connected with some local organisations. Tough C, Mark, he's offered to sponsor her with some foam balls so she can do it inside if the weather's bad. She's collaborating with someone from GM Moving. We're building on this legacy of this community-based football. And Ella says, it's not necessarily about becoming an amazing football player. It's about this confidence, about this connectivity, committing to something, being part of something, obviously moving and being outside. So I'm really proud of her, really pleased. I'm so happy that she was, came under the Right to the Streets umbrella, but that she's, taking this baton and she's going to run with it now. It's brilliant. Really pleased about that.
Beautiful.
So we had a really lovely application from someone in Gorse Hill just to do their alleyway, but they kind of went a bit above and beyond. They cleared and sort of cleaned and then painted, planted, and they got these solar lights in, and it was just lovely. Like, it looked so beautiful, so loved, and it was really that was, even though that was a small individual grant, that was still absolutely key to this whole project, just making your spaces a bit more loved and populated. And then from an organisation, we had Seed Studios, who I've mentioned before. They did a sound walk around Seymour Park, and they worked with a composer who went out and they were recording sounds from nature, and then they came back and they made it into an app so that when you go walking you can hear the sounds of nature, which was really, really creative, really lovely. And the composer was really keen to work with community residents, and now they can sort of walk around and it's given their neighbourhood a new feel, a new sound, and a new sense of belonging. We had theatre in the park, and this was all run by Theatre of the Senses. So they did a few different projects within. They managed to make the money go really far, actually. That's something to mention. I think they must have engaged with at least 200 people.
Wow.
Yeah. And they had under £2,000 to do it. But they really, really put the time in. Really lots of engagement.
And And we've seen that over and over again, I think, in the stories from this work, that actually people in communities, they often don't need very much in terms of resource and finance to make amazing things happen. And they come at it with such passion, and, you know, they care, and they've got those connections that they bring their heart and they bring their hands, and they crack on with stuff that often larger pots of money going to other organisations can get caught, can't they, a little bit more in maybe overheads and administrative stuff, and actually in stuff that isn't making more immediate impact, which I guess speaks to a lot of the conversations we had early on around the process and around risks and how risk is perceived, you know, because actually there's small pots of money that lots of places would go, but it's too risky giving, you know, to a newly formed constituted group or to an individual. What if? Whereas actually what we see is that what flows is phenomenal. So what would you like to see happen now? Anything that you've any dreams that it's stirred that you'd like to see realised?
Annual events. So Kick Out Knife Crime, which we sponsored. I think there's something in that. We should do something annually. Working with Gorse Studios, definitely. Also, they had a party in the park, which was beautiful as well. So maybe a collaborative effort with Gorse Studios, but, you know, with this sort of football tournament, you know, we'll get Ella involved. So I think, that kind of annual event. I mean, it would be great to have like this sort of community notice board, maybe a physical one and a digital one, because there isn't one place where we find out where everything is. You have to actively go out. And I think maybe part of the connector role is to sort of highlight the different events and workshops and activities that are happening.
It's all about the people. It's like, drop the mic now. Job done. There is, to your point around, I guess, the signposting, because a lot of what you've done has been the in-person signposting, having those conversations, being and bumping in places that you can let people know about what's going on, and you can find out what they're doing and how the two connect. And then also some kind of real old school, not rocket science, communication of just having you present in place with a bike and Active Souls on to be able to go and put posters up in all those different community centres. It's been lovely seeing cycling through the parks there and seeing the Right to the Streets posters and information up in parks, as well as stuff online in local Facebook groups. So all of that felt so important, because often stuff that we talk about, but quite often we don't have somebody who knows even where to put those things or how to get them up and do it well and do it kind of in a timely way. Anything you know now in terms of that sort of communication that you didn't know when you started?
The WhatsApp groups have been very active and actually a really good way of reaching certain demographics. But then, really, it's just about sort of approaching people like Christine at St John's and the team there, and just because their notice boards are really prominent on Ayres Road.
It feels like most neighbourhoods now have far more prolific kind of, street WhatsApp groups and things. And particularly it's one of the things that came out, I'd say, of COVID in the kind of mutual aid space, of lots more street connectors, people on the streets having their own WhatsApp groups in order to provide support for each other. And many of those seem to have kind of continued and been repurposed. I guess what feels probably a bit different is that in North Trafford, actually there's a lot of amazing community-led, community-owned spaces. So I'm just wondering, how different do you think it would have been if you'd been in another neighbourhood where you don't have as many of those community spaces as exist there?
I mean, it would have made my job a lot more difficult. And I think I probably would have been relying on the post offices or, local shops. But I mean, anywhere with a cafe tends to be, it's so simple, isn't it? But, just somewhere to sit and have a brew, and, if they've got food on as well, or if they offer services like OT Creative Space. Linda's been amazing. She's been really supportive. I did lots of printing of photos there. She let me use the space, in this really cool art studio. They almost have their own sort of individual identities, and that's really important, and that was reflected in what they do in those spaces. St John's over the summer have done silent discos and afternoon teas, which is really lovely because they do have a slightly older crowd there. You know, all of these spaces offer opportunities for people to learn something new or try something and be part of their collective.
I feel like I'd be amiss if I didn't also mention, of course, Old Trafford Wellbeing Centre.
Oh, of course.
And Stretford Public Hall. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, and I'm bound to have left out others. But acknowledging all of those, I guess because they feel quite unique to the space. In addition, as you described, they're in addition to, you know, there's Trafford College, there's Stretford High School, there's shops, some of which are very much independent, locally owned shops.
Yeah.
Places like our post offices, our cafes, there is the leisure centre and the parks. So it's just recognising, I guess, the number of different spaces and assets across that neighbourhood, and I felt like you connected with all of them and they all played a role in the work as a whole, and how, you know, because you know them, because you're present in place and you live there, you know, how important that has been really in all of this. So my last question is, has your involvement in Right to the Streets in any way changed your relationship with the streets, with our parks, with our public spaces, and with Old Trafford and North Trafford as a whole? Yes,
definitely. I now consider myself to be Trafford's version of Leslie Knope. Parks and Recs. Parks are my thing now. I'm always like going through, I'm looking at rubbish, or I'm sort of looking at who's using what spaces. And similarly with streets, you know, I'm keeping my own bins and recycling and things like that, because it's important. You know, we need to take care of our spaces. You know, if something is well cared for, you do feel sort of safer because you know it's been loved. Unfortunately, we do have some fly tipping issues in Old Trafford, and it's very disappointing because you walk past and you just think, oh God. And quite often it is people from outside the area, and you know, and it is quite disheartening when lots of people have put so much effort and time into making the streets look nice. However, the community spirit is very much alive, and it's just nice sort of riding or walking around and just having a quick chat with local neighbours and just all keeping an eye out for each other. So yeah, it's definitely changed that. I feel like the web of communication and people is much stronger and wider now. And it's a really lovely feeling.
So it's pretty simple, isn't it, when you think about it? Place-based projects or movements only work when place-based people are involved and invested in the work, and importantly, feel like they're being listened to. We also heard how small pots of funding can help kickstart projects, help groups and individuals test out ideas, and importantly, animate our streets, parks and public spaces so they feel more welcoming and safe. Community connectors are vital, and I'm really pleased to hear that there's more and more opportunities opening up across the country in similar roles. Next, let's hear how support from a local authority can ensure that your project and work is not only embedded in place to begin with, but can ensure a longer-term legacy. I'm in a beautifully wood-panelled room in Trafford Town Hall, and I'm joined by two people who've been key in bringing Right to the Streets to North Trafford and who've remained critical to ensuring it has a longer-term impact.
Hi, I'm Emma Mosley. I'm the Senior Policy Manager at Trafford Council.
Hi, I'm Rose Thompson. I'm the newly appointed exec member for Communities and Safety in Trafford.
Great. And you're obviously a local councillor as well, aren't you? So which ward do you represent, Rose?
I represent Brooklands, which is in Sale.
At Dear Moving, we hear from lots of women and girls that a big barrier to them being able to live an active life is their fear of abuse or harassment on our streets, public spaces and parks. We were therefore very keen to do something to think about how we take more of a whole system approach to address that issue and to think about the actions that we can all take. To do this successfully in place, involving all partners, we knew we had to work with anchor institutions, those who present in place, who know the local community, the neighbourhood groups and existing local partnerships. So that's where Trafford Council comes in. So I start by asking Emma, from her side, how their involvement in Right to the Streets started.
Sure, it feels like a long time ago now, but it was not last summer, but the summer before, one of our councillors was contacted by local residents in her local constituency who were concerned about some of the kind of sexual harassment and sexual assaults that had been happening on the canals in her ward. And she wanted us to kind of look into that and do some work around the area. So we wanted to gather a bit of information about people's concerns in Trafford. So we did a survey of residents in Trafford, asking them about their feelings of safety on the streets of Trafford, what particular areas they felt unsafe in, what the reasons for that were. So we could use that in combination with crime data to get a picture of what people's real lived experiences were of living in Trafford. So it was obviously particularly targeted at women, but it was open to anyone. And a lot of the data that we discovered from that was that there were particular areas of Trafford that people felt really unsafe, and that sometimes went along with the crime data and sometimes didn't, and that there was quite a lot of localised reasons why people were feeling unsafe. So it was things like streets that were very dark, or a lot of kind of antisocial behaviour that was happening in those areas. And we were told by someone at GMCA that this data would be really good to apply for the Safer Streets Home Office Fund. That was quite a recent fund. They'd come out after what happened with Sarah Everard. A lot of people obviously wanted to take action, and that's kind of where the fund came from. So we applied for that, and we wanted to do it with a local organisation because we recognised that someone like GM Moving had great expertise, and that councils don't always have like that community wider element. It's better to try and get as many partners involved as possible. So we kind of approached you guys and we did the application, and we're obviously successful, and yeah, it all came from there.
So can you tell us how Trafford Council have been involved over the last sort of 12, 13 months?
So we've tried to be involved in kind of every area of the project to make those connections between the different elements, so like the art project or the data or the kind of training, and trying to put people in touch with people across the council and also other local organisations. We've also tried to kind of just support on a resource level, trying to give data and support wherever we can in that way. We obviously are a big organisation and we have a lot of different elements, and it's easy when you're working in local government to kind of forget about the power and the kind of resources you have to pull on, because we're obviously quite limited on money, but we do have a lot of those resources that we've been trying to make available to the project wherever we can. And on a personal note, I've got a lot of experience in gender-based violence that I've been trying to both learn from the project and also give that expertise to the project. So yeah, it's been a really great experience.
And I think that blend of kind of personal and professional expertise has been a common thread, hasn't it, across the work, and people really bringing their own personal passion and experiences as a woman as well, who, you know, works here and travels around in this local place. So Rose, obviously you took on your exec position just in May, so you've come to it in that role sort of more recently. But when did you first kind of get a sense of what was going on and what we were trying to do?
Because our communities are the most important thing in Trafford, and our safe communities, thriving communities, communities that can go out and about and do what they want with no fear or hindrance. That's one of our goals in Trafford, isn't it? To keep people safe and to make it an enjoyable place to be.
And I think the voluntary and community sector has been absolutely key. So the fact you've got loads of brilliant people and places as well, loads of community hubs across this area that have acted as a great place for people to convene. But again, one of the other strengths has been that real sense of a kind of a commitment really from the council in terms of your policy, Emma, and in terms of, you know, the councillors' commitment to say this is gender-based violence, safety in our streets is really important to us. And I know this is just one of a whole swathe of different things that you're doing. So can you give us kind of a taste of some of the other activities and interventions that are taking place in Trafford?
Yeah, we do get funding from GMCVA to put on local projects around safety, and Standing Together initiative, which is around keeping people safe and reducing harm and strengthening communities. So we get £100,000 a year to go into those community-led projects. And recently we've been told that we're getting an extra £50,000 from the Lord Mayor's funding pot, because there's a realisation that community-led projects in the local areas are effective. And we recognise that things like CCTV and better lit streets are a small part of what we can do. And we are bringing our CCTV group into the Safer Communities Partnership. And we're building on an infrastructure, bringing in more CCTV camera surveillance. But we know that's just a small part of what we can do to keep people safe.
Fantastic. Anything you want to add, Emma, in terms of, I guess, policy position?
We're trying to use this as a jumping off point for a lot of the policy that we're thinking about in this area. So one example of that is that we're doing what's called a policy lab for the Cooperative Councils Network, which is going to be different councils across the country sharing their learning around gender-based violence. So we're going to be leading on that, and we've been funded by the Cooperative Council Network to the tune of £20,000. So a small amount, but hopefully we'll have some good innovative learning that we can share with lots of different councils. We've got a few that are very interested. It's going to be all across the country. So yeah, I'm quite excited about that.
Yeah, there's lots of pots, little things going on that we fund. Trafford Match funds the Talk, Listen, Change project, which is around behavioural change programmes for men and boys to develop healthy and safe and happy relationships. We also work with a group called Men at Work, and they train professionals who work with boys and men around encouraging happy relationships and having safe relationships with women. And also there's the collective as well, the Trafford Community Collective, who I think there's probably about 150 members in that now. So, yeah, there's lots of things going on around the borough.
And I guess that's what's been really strong, is seeing that from those kind of shifting the cultural norms, those kind of conversations like Men at Work, also positive masculinity have been coming in and working within some of the schools. And then we've had Freedom Personal Safety doing the active bystander training and the campaigns. There's been some of those kind of what are the big cultural shifts that we need to happen, that we need to have conversations and campaigns to shift language and thinking ways of behaving. Then some of those changes around the policy that in particular, you know, Emma, you've obviously been focused on, and how can we kind of gain learning from what's happening else around the country, but how can we now, you know, make sure that we draw on all the things that we've learned here in Trafford over the last 12 months to help accelerate change more broadly. And all those physical changes that you referred to, Rose, as well. So, you know, yes, lighting, you know, comes up over and over again in particular, alongside, you know, all the great stuff that's been going on around painting murals, getting people out and about, kind of really appreciating their local space and place and having a greater sense of ownership over them. And then all the stuff that like the Community Collective organised, you know, all those different groups coming together as a VCSE sector, all being able to activate each other and, you know, inspire each other and get out walking and cycling and, you know, wheeling more often, and having lots of different events that in places so people see each other and go, oh, actually, this is a nice place to be. And it feels as though that this project, I guess, has just been that catalyst across all those little layers to kind of notice in some ways the things that you're already doing and then give them a little bit more kind of an oomph, you know, and glue them together and a bit more direction. And I guess from where I am, what I've seen is it feels like the energy is phenomenal. So I get a sense that actually a confidence that that's going to continue to flow. So when we talk about what next, I'm already seeing things feel like they're moving now anyway in the right direction, and those groups and those people are taking stuff on board. I guess from where you both sit, what do you think is going to continue? It's going to continue to happen and at pace. And what would you really like to see continue that maybe needs some kind of concerted effort to make sure that it has that longer lasting change?
I would say that I think that a lot of the learning that has happened will continue. People, you know, still have that learning, and it's very impactful. The fact that it's proven that community focus is a great way to kind of tackle gender-based violence. I mean, if you look at the statistics, obviously the place that women are most in danger of gender-based violence is in their partnerships, in the home. But this project is more focused on that kind of feeling of community and feeling of safety. And I think making gender-based violence something that is a community focus and showing that it overlaps with so many different things like active travel, art, culture, just community feeling in general, I think is really important. And hopefully we can take some of that learning and some of that energy and it can continue.
But we've also been very keen, haven't we, to say it is a catalyst for longer term change, and that there's people that have taken on the tools, the resources, stuff that's really available, and will continue to embed them in the things that they're doing day to day.
But one thing I think Trafford has got that kind of will keep this on the agenda is that Trafford Council is full of women. I think 3 out of the 4 leaders are women. The councillors are Labour councillors, 50%, maybe more, is women. And there's a lot of senior staff are women. So that gives us that kind of a lived experience view of policies and change and actions. So I think we're quite special in Trafford that we have got that impetus to see this kind of project through.
I would love it if people took a more kind of community-based approach to gender-based violence and street safety and didn't look at these issues in such narrow, criminalised ways and thought more about it more broadly and about women's kind of inclusion in society, and looked at our project and looked at the kind of things that have been really successful and tried to learn from that. Obviously, when you ask kind of the average person about what they want on the streets for safety, people will often reference things like CCTV or lights. And I think our project shows that with a bit more creativity and a bit more innovation, you can have a lot more impact by focusing on community and funding the expertise that already exists in a community.
Definitely, that feels like that's been the biggest strength and also the biggest message that's come out of the work. With your policy hat on then, are there any other top tips that you would give to policymakers out there to help them make that shift away from maybe a traditional response that's focused on kind of policing and CCTV to more of a community response? Because some of that's about the questions we ask elicit a very different response.
My top tip would be don't pretend you're coming from the issue completely cold, that there's many incredible experts out there in your community who are already got those contacts, who are already doing amazing community work, who are already experts in this area. And if you go out there and you find them and you listen to their expertise and listen to people in the community, you won't have to come up with ideas out of nowhere. You'll be able to just say, oh, what you're doing is incredible, I'll support you in that. It's very easy as a policymaker to think that you have to kind of come up with ideas all on your own, and that's just not the best way to come up with any kind of policy. It's always better if you listen to your community and partner with people that already know what they're doing.
That must be music to your ears, Rose, because let's be honest, as councillors working in local government, you know, it's a real scarcity of funding. And if this is just about additional funding and a new initiative and new pots, then that feels very challenging in current times. But that creates this whole abundance, isn't it? And that's what we've seen already. We've seen this huge abundance of people, of expertise, of ideas, of things going on that help build that sense of community. So where does that leave you in terms of what you think would be kind of key tips maybe for other councillors and people in your position?
I believe that most boroughs have an infrastructure body that is the lead for the voluntary and community sector, and that infrastructure body gives training, support, funding to the voluntary sector. And I think it's crucial that councils see that body as a true partner. The community sector is a complete asset and a resource that we can use to great advantage. So to other councils, like, make friends with your infrastructure body, make sure you know them, build those relationships.
Good tips. And I think generally making friends and building good relationships and partnerships has been kind of the key throughout, hasn't it? Is there anything that you would like to see, I guess, at a national level that you think would help propel safer streets, right to the streets for all women and girls?
Well, I was amazed to learn a couple of months ago that sexual harassment and misogyny is not a crime. So I'm a Labour councillor, so I'm hoping that, and Angela Rayner at a conference referenced that in her speech, that Labour would look to make that a crime. So hopefully next year that will come to be, because I think that's really important, that those should be recognised as criminal offences. So yeah, that's nationally, that's what I'd like to see happen.
I would very much like if this was kind of given the attention on a national stage that I think it deserves. It's something that affects all women. We know from the UN survey that 97% of women have been sexually harassed in the UK, and we know that 1 in 4 women are sexually assaulted, and also obviously domestic abuse is 1 in 4 as well. So I think the fact that it's often kind of siloed into a small issue that's just kind of considered occasionally when something big happens is something I'd like to change. And if it was considered within all policy as an element and given that kind of wider consideration, I think that would be really good. And also it should be given the funding that it deserves.
Sounds like some good asks there, some good calls to action. And hopefully the policy lab that obviously you're involved in will be one way in which, I guess, across those different councils across the country can come together and recognise both what things they can do that are within their own power and influence, but also then provide a shared call to action for the changes we need to see at a national level. If anyone is listening who'd like to get involved in that, who doesn't already aware, is there a way that they can find out more?
You do need to be a cooperative council to be involved in the policy lab, but if anyone has any questions or just interested in it, then they can contact me at the council.
I mean, it has been good, I guess, that point around what we see in the agenda, and to your point, Rose, about, at the moment, unfortunately, a lot of day-to-day harassment isn't actually a criminal offence, and that means that people don't report it, they don't even recognise it as it counting effectively, and that shift is definitely needed. We are seeing shifts in terms of the level of attention given, I guess, generally to sexual harassment in public spaces. So we've seen the campaign in London and across Transport for London, and also in Northumbria have recently launched a campaign called It All Adds Up. So if people haven't seen that, I would recommend. And then also West Yorkshire have recently launched their campaign as well called Just Don't. And obviously all of this, again, sort of builds on the work in Greater Manchester around the, Is This OK campaign Andy Burnham had launched last year. So, those are all kind of, I guess, shoots of hope that people are going, this does matter. And all of those different campaigns have been developed kind of often in collaboration with local women's groups to say, OK, how do we actually make sure that we put women's experiences at the heart of this? And they're all slightly different because they all have a slightly different kind of maybe place-based nuance or slightly different take. But I think that opportunity for them now to learn from each other and for us all to learn from each other and go, OK, so what next? How do we bring all of this together to create a real sense of systemic change for everybody would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sounds good. Say that in this lovely wood-panelled room in Trafford Council, there's change coming.
There is.
Hopefully.
A really important insight there into how policy and decision-making at a local government level can play a real role in tackling street harassment. But as we've learnt throughout the series, it's not the only way we can achieve safer, more joyful streets, parks and public spaces, where everyone is invited to be active. It's not down to any one actor, institution or organisation. We all have a role to play together. In this series, you've heard from just some of our partners who co-delivered the Right to the Streets vision, including those who put on events like the Party in the Park or the colourful parades, or who taught kids how to use cameras, staged exhibitions, painted murals, collected data, produced podcasts, designed walking and cycling trails, published guides, resources, devised public campaigns, delivered active bystander training, and helped to connect the community. The list goes on and on. I can't stress this enough. Right to the Streets simply wouldn't be and couldn't have happened without them. So let's close this episode and series by hearing more from them. So at Stretford Public Hall for the Right to the Streets celebration event, it's the culmination of our initial 12 months of Right to the Streets activity. And it's absolutely thronging with activity here. There's football sessions happening, workshops, how to fix your bike, and we've got Freedom Personal Safety delivering one of their active bystander training sessions, alongside photography exhibitions and sensory walks and performances. And of course, there's food and drink to keep us going. It's full of people of all ages, genders and backgrounds having fun together, and it's just brilliant. We've invited all of the partners to come along as a huge thank you, so I catch up with a few of them to chat about their experience of Right to the Streets. First, I bump into Ellie, who you heard in our public space design episode in the first series of the Right to the Streets podcast.
I'm Ellie Cosgrave. I'm from Publica, and we've been leading the work around exploring what the key themes and ideas are when it comes to women's safety, sense of belonging and joyfulness in public spaces.
I ask Ellie what impact this work has had on what Publica do.
Being part of Right to the Streets as Publica has been one of the most incredible opportunities to let loose with our creativity. So often when we're asked to do stuff around women's safety, public space design, it gets serious and intense really quickly, and it also gets very theoretical, and we're trying to find changes that we can make in real built projects, and that can be stressful, intimidating, overwhelming for a lot of people. What we have been invited to do for Right to the Streets is to centre communities, to make sure we prioritise joy and accessibility. And so that's opened up a whole realm of possibilities for us to start playing together and to make things that are really, quite complicated and stressful ideas, feelings, accessible through making them joyful and something that people can really start to engage with and feel like they know already what the issues are.
Earlier in the day, Ellie developed a workshop here at a celebration event, and I'm dying to hear what happened.
We're here at the celebration event at Right to the Streets, and we've just played a game with a gang of amazing women where we've been co-creating a vision and manifesto for Trafford being a safe place for everyone. And we've co-written a poem.
In Trafford, I know I matter. Trafford tastes sweet, and I'm an integral part of it. In Trafford, everybody's eyes sparkle. We are allowed to be in our own spaces. We are free, relaxed, and oh so calm. We are equal, not judged, open, warm, sweet, rooted. We listen, we are kind, we find the common ground, and the possibilities are endless.
Thanks to Vic there, our producer, for expertly reading out that fantastic poem. It really sums it up perfectly, doesn't it? We are equal, we're kind, and we find the common ground. And when we do that, the possibilities truly are endless. Next, I grab George Devlin.
So I'm George Devlin. I'm the Chief Officer of Trafford Community Collective. So the collective is the sort of strategic voice of the VCFSE sector in Trafford. We support, promote and connect the sector that enables us to be involved in the strategic conversations about development and delivery of services. And our key sort of USP, I suppose, is that through the sector we're able to connect and communicate with Trafford residents.
George goes on to tell me how the Trafford Community Collective has played a really integral role in Right to the Streets and how the work has linked up to more projects and roles in Trafford communities.
We've been involved in this project through the development of a community grants fund. So we've had a community connector, Verity. We employed Verity to develop and promote the community grants fund. We had around £17,500 to promote community-based activity. We set up the grants fund. Verity really effectively connected with the community. So in August and September, we had 22 different projects running as a result of the work that Verity had done, and we kind of provided the money. I think for me that shows the capacity within the community to do things for themselves, promoting safer streets for women and girls. In terms of moving things forward, I think what we're keen to do is make sure that this project links into the other work that we're doing as a collective and links into the other work that Trafford Council are doing. So we've got a really strong approach to neighbourhood development, neighbourhood working. Within that, we're really keen to engage with Trafford residents. We're keen to promote personal safety, in particular for women and girls. The collective has got some funding to think about how we would reduce violence. So we've got a Violence Reduction Alliance Facilitator in post, which is quite a title, but it's really important because the idea is that he will work in the same way that Verity did with people in and around Gorse Hill to set up an alliance of organisations and people that can think about what do we need to do differently, how can we do it, and then we've got around about 100,000 to support the community to do those things. That community-based activity can then feed straight into the neighbourhood work that we're all doing, and we can promote that involvement of people, ensure that the priority around safety for women and girls, but for everybody, is a key platform within our neighbourhood plans. I think the other part of it, as a collective, we're keen to promote all the material that's been developed through the whole Right to the Streets project. That's one of the reasons I'm here, to get that sort of overview of what's been happening and feed as much as we can into Trafford, but then feed it also through into Greater Manchester, so that we learn from what's happening in other areas.
I love that. What a fantastic example of embedding a legacy in place. I'm really looking forward to checking back in with George over the next few months to see how all of that is progressing. I then head downstairs and poke my head around the door of one of the brilliant workshops going on today. It's How to Fix Your Bike workshop with Belinda from Be Pedal Ready.
My name's Belinda. I'm the founder of Be Pedal Ready and also the newly appointed Great Manchester Bicycle Mayor. The organisation I have created is called Be Pedal Ready. Be Pedal Ready is about creating a space, particularly for young women and girls, to learn about bike mechanics and learn about the bike industry, basically.
You might be asking yourself, well, what does fixing a bike have to do with safer streets? So I asked Belinda why it's important.
It's important because, unfortunately, the facts for the UK is that the bike mechanic industry is made up of 96% white males. So as much as we are really trying to encourage more young girls and particularly diversity within cycling, that needs to represent when it comes to actually fixing bikes and just the bike industry in general.
Belinda goes on to tell me more about those sessions she's been delivering.
Right to the Streets, I feel very passionately about, because again, it's something that's very passionate as regards of Be Pedal Ready, is the fact that it's about giving a space and creating a space for young girls, for them to be visible, for them to be seen, and most of all, for them to be safe. Be Pedal Ready came and is involved in this because I think the more knowledge that young girls especially have when it comes to fixing their bikes means that they can become self-reliant, confident, and most of all safe. So we have delivered a women's bike maintenance session. It was at St John's, Old Trafford, and we were very fortunate to have it in the church. So it was a very special, unique setting. It was open to everyone, so you didn't even need a bike. It was accessible to all. You literally could just come from work and come down and everything was there. And it was teaching people the real basics of a bike, but also how to fix it. And just mainly women's safe-only space where they can feel that they can ask any questions and feel comfortable and basically grow in knowledge within those 2 hours. Just now we had a really special moment with Annabelle. She came with the family came today to do the workshop at Stretford Public Hall, and she's 5 and she's never fixed a bike before, and she was incredibly enthusiastic, and you could see that, you know, she really wanted to learn more. And for me, that's basically what it is about. I think the more we can get, especially young girls and even as young as her, enthusiastic about fixing bikes and getting dirt on your hands, and that's okay, and actually getting the logical side of the mind working, next thing you know, she could be the next future engineer, the next scientist, all these type of things. And I truly believe that bike mechanics, especially from very young, is the beginning of that.
It's just incredible, isn't it? How something so simple like knowing how to fix your bike can empower more women and girls, not just to move more, but to feel safe in the knowledge that if something does go wrong on the move, we have the confidence to fix it and continue to move. Another one of our key delivery partners is Open Data Manchester, who you heard from in episode 1 of this series of the podcast.
Hi, I'm Julian Tate. I am the Chief Exec and co-founder of Open Data Manchester. In the Right to the Streets project, we've been going about trying to help people understand and explore the area. So it's about listening to people, seeing what their experiences, lived experiences of the area are, and mapping that, and also taking them out on walks where they can fill in booklets to say what their perceptions of the area is. And it's to kind of, so we can get a more holistic view of what the area is like, because usually when people see areas from outside, they don't really understand them and understand the lovely complexity and fabulous nature of places where we live. From the Rights to the Streets project, it'd be really great to see people carry on some of the work that's been going on within the Rights to the Streets programme. There's been loads of resources that have been developed that people can use. And I think it's what's really interesting within the North Trafford community. There's an energy to do stuff and to make things better. And I hope that we've played a little part in that. And I hope that people go out and be more confident about what they want within their areas.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with Julian. We all have a right to the streets, and we all have a right to say what we want in and on our streets too. Finally, let's hear from Gorgeous Gorse Hill. You'll remember Ruth, their founder, talking to us in the very first episode of the Right to the Streets podcast. Leanne Mullen is here representing the group today, and I asked what Gorgeous Gorse Hill has been up to as part of the Right to the Streets.
Gorgeous Gorse Hill were lucky enough to receive some funding as part of the Right to the Streets project, and we, as a result of the funding, we've done a few different projects. We've installed art as a big mural on the side of a building locally. We're about to install some art in a local park along the railings, and we're going to jazz up and install some art on some local telephone exchange boxes as well. I think they brighten the place up. I feel like they make it more welcoming. I feel like it makes the area more inviting for people, and I think it sends a message to anybody that does want to cause any mischief that this isn't the place for it, basically. It's a nice place and it's a lovely neighbourhood.
Fabulous. And when we talk about creating legacy, those murals that have been painted by Gorgeous Gorse Hill, the telephone exchange boxes, the art on the railings, it doesn't get pulled down or painted over when the work is over. It continues to be seen and enjoyed, and as Leanne says, creates a place that is more inviting for everyone. Now, throughout the last 8 episodes of this series of the podcast, you've heard me ask the same question to everyone. So, what would you like to see happen next? So it'd be rude not to hear from everyone I've spoken to. What would they like to see happen next?
We've spent a year together and we've had an amazing time learning from each other, learning from communities on the ground. And I feel like we've just started. I feel like there's a huge amount of energy, momentum, information, knowledge, and we're kind of now in the starting blocks ready to go. I feel like we've just set up. And so I hope that we will be able to allow the work that we've created, the resources, the games, the blog posts, the podcasts, become the key resources for everyone everywhere to start to make changes in their own lives, in their own work. And so our task is to make what we've done as accessible as possible.
I think to just continue as it is and just for it to be louder. I think the ethos that it has is, women and young girls want to be more visible, want to be seen and, be treated fairly. And I think that voice just needs to become louder. And not just Trafford, there's 10 other boroughs where this is an issue. It's not just a Trafford issue, it's Bolton, Bury, Rochdale, all over. So, to have this maybe moving around would be incredible.
I suppose the energy of the community and the wishes of the community in reality is for people who make decisions to listen, to not kind of do the easy thing, which is just like look at the data that exists in kind of national data sets about what an area is like and listen to communities and see what that lived experience is like. And through that, we can create more sustainable and co-designed solutions to a lot of the problems we have, because generally what happens is things get developed, project ends, and people stop using them.
I think now it's time for the big guns to get involved. So the local government, decision makers, businesses need to get behind it and continue the great work that the project has done.
So there you have it. Lots of rallying cries for more action to continue the momentum and hopefully see more Right to the Streets action pop up in communities like yours. So that's it for this episode and for this series of the Dear Moving podcast. I'm sad to say goodbye, but it's a huge thanks for listening and a goodbye for now. I'm sure we'll be popping up on a podcast very soon. Listen out to hear what we'll be talking about next. This podcast and the whole of the Right to the Streets is just the start of the conversation. So as ever, we'd love to hear from you. What would you like to see happen next? Are there any Safer Streets initiatives happening in your area? How can we connect and learn together? Anything in particular that's inspired you and that you're going to take into your community? Whatever it is, let us know and we'll share your thoughts on future episodes of this podcast. We've got a few easy ways you can get in touch. Tell us on social media, we're on LinkedIn and Twitter, simply search Dear Moving, or drop us an email. Just head over to our website at dearmoving.co.uk and hit the contact button. Finally, a massive thanks to everyone who has contributed to this episode and to the whole Right to the Street series of the Dear Moving podcast. That's all 150 of you who have now been on this podcast. The Right to the Street series of the Dear Moving podcast is just one element of the Right to the Streets initiative, led by Dear Moving, Trafford Council, Open Data Manchester and other Dear Moving partners. Thanks again to funding from the Home Office for Safer Streets. This series is a Mike Media production.